Well, my name is Jim Whited. I'm the CEO of the American College of Sports Medicine, and I want to thank you all for being part of this meeting. Your time and your commitment is well regarded, well respected, and we appreciate very much you being here with us. Mark Twain said that history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. Well, we're not repeating history today, but we are honoring and celebrating it. We are rhyming with the past by launching a new initiative. This is a celebration of 10 years of progress and success by the Inclusive Fitness Coalition. It also is the launch of a new enterprise, the Partnership for Inclusive Health, to build and expand around the U.S. inclusive, healthy communities. We do have a webcast audience that has joined us. We won't ask them to identify themselves for obvious reasons, but just suffice it to say that we have a group of individual leaders and leading organizations in this room with many more that are part of this movement. I'd like to thank the sponsors, Inclusive Fitness Coalition co-founding organizations, American College of Sports Medicine and the National Center on Health, Physical Activity, and Disability, NCPAD. And additional event sponsors for here are the Lakeshore Foundation and UAB Lakeshore Research Collaborative. In 2007, how many of you remember the year 2007? Okay. We gathered in this same space, meaning the National Press Club, to launch the start of a national initiative to promote physical activity inclusion through the Inclusive Fitness Coalition. This was a big step for ACSM in regard to looking at that intersection of fitness and physical activity in persons with disabilities, in regard to just organizing our commitment that was already there. And the Inclusive Fitness Coalition was established to address policy, environmental, and societal issues associated with the lack of inclusion and access to physical activity among people with disabilities. For 10 years, the Inclusive Fitness Coalition has promoted equitable access to and safe use of fitness and recreational equipment, facilities, and programs to help reduce debilitating secondary conditions associated with a sedentary lifestyle. And we've led this charge through a number of key events and milestones through the history of the Inclusive Fitness Coalition, which again, we're celebrating its 10th anniversary. When you're having important work being done, time does fly, and we're very proud of the milestones that have been achieved. I'll just give just a few examples. In 2008, ACSM and NCPAD developed the first ever inclusive fitness certification that is now part out there to really equip fitness professionals with knowledge, skills, and abilities that they need to work effectively with persons with disabilities. In 2013, the American Society for Testing Materials, ASTM, approved two new standards for inclusive fitness equipment, which we were very supportive of. And then in 2014, launched a global campaign to end the exclusion of people with disability from physical activity and all associated kind of areas called Commit to Inclusion at the White House Summit on Improved Fitness and Health for Americans with Disabilities. And then lastly, and most recently, though achievements are occurring all the time, a number of partners worked with the U.S. Surgeon General's call to action to promote walking and walkable communities and rollable communities to include people with disability. So the Partnership for Inclusive Health, which my colleague Jim Rimmer will be addressing in just a couple of minutes, is being launched today, is a continuation and an extension of that effort. But history and progress about people, ideas, and action, it's all of these things. It really is, when we're talking about who are we trying to help, it's important to have a human face associated with that. And if you're really talking about champion efforts, it's important to have human faces associated with that too, so that we personify. It's like a movement, but you personify it. I'd like to take a moment to recognize an extraordinary person who's with us today, Dr. Margaret Giannini, Peg Giannini, a physician who has dedicated her professional life to persons with disabilities, the first director of the National Institute of Disability Rehabilitation Research, director of the Health and Human Services Office on Disability, involved with so many things, and particularly a key role with I Can Do It, You Can Do It, where at a recent awards event in Miami, a perpetual award was named for her. It was done where there were more than 1,500 students with disabilities also being recognized at that time. Peg is a champion and a friend to this cause in a unique way. I just got one quote from her. There are many. And she says, "I always like to say that all people with disabilities, rich or poor, white, black, or Native American, young or old, all smile in the same language. If we continue to be vigilant, committed, persistent, and compassionate, we can ensure they continue to smile forever." And I just think that's a wonderful kind of quote. She's relentless, inspiring, and aspiring, and heroic. Please join me in showing our appreciation to a person truly iconic to our common cause. Peg. Thank you so very much. So the Inclusive Fitness Coalition currently has over 210 member organizations representing national and international disability advocacy, fitness, sports, health, and rehabilitation interests committed to the common vision of universally inclusive fitness and recreation opportunities for people with disabilities. We recognize that we must now expand our focus to the broader conversation of inclusive health, which is not only a public health issue, but a human rights issue. I was at a wonderful meeting yesterday with Special Olympics where we were looking at how do we get organizations engaged in regard to persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So we see our effort together really expanding that to inclusive health. And again, not just as health, but a human rights issue. So to do all that, we must have a comprehensive approach that works to decrease health inequities and disparities that may exist for all people, with the ultimate goal of health equity for all. And as Tim Shriver said yesterday, the chair of the Special Olympics, health justice for all. It was in a very moving kind of address that he made to the group. So to address that, kind of this new phase with all these things that have been accomplished, I would like to welcome and have you welcome also my colleague, friend, and co-chair of this initiative, Dr. Jim Rimmer, who's going to take us to the next decade's focus on inclusive health. And as John F. Kennedy said, let us begin anew. And that's what this is about. Please join me in welcoming Jim Rimmer.
Thank you very much, Jim, and it's a great pleasure to be here 10 years later. I couldn't have asked for a better colleague than Jim Whitehead, Vice President of the American College of Sports Medicine, one of the largest exercise organizations in the world, who embraced the concept of inclusion many, many years ago. So I really thank you personally, and hope that today is a new beginning for a number of reasons. So let me just go through, four major points. First, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and what preceded that was the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and the Education for All Handicapped Children's Act in 1975. And those laws really created a very powerful message that people with disabilities need to be involved and integrated in their communities. So they did a wonderful thing by passing those laws, and today we see more children with disabilities included in school programs, including physical education and some of the outdoor activities that occur. But the ADA, which was the most recent passage of a federal law associated with disability, really only went a certain distance, and that distance was looking at the bricks in the mortar. So it was ensuring that people had the right to get to work, that they had good public transportation, they had access in and out of buildings and bathrooms, and et cetera, et cetera. But where it fell short was the concept of what goes beyond access is the essence of inclusion, right? It's all about not necessarily getting into a building, but are you getting along with your coworkers? Can you go to that softball practice with them? Is it easy to get to lunch? Can you live and recreate in your own neighborhoods? Can you go to your religious organization of your choice without having the difficulty of going into the back of the building? They did a great job on that end of it. But today what I'd like you to think about is, let's move this message and this campaign a step forward. And rather than use the term accessibility as the front and center issue, consider the word inclusion. And the way I define inclusion is that there has to be 3 parts of any program or organization or structure that you're involved in. The first part of it is that for a person with a disability to use whatever that venue or structure is or program, it has to be efficient. If it takes someone 15 to 20 minutes to get on an exercise machine and they have 3 people assisting them, that's not really inclusion. Now, the federal law will say that's accessible, right? They got in the building, they can go to the bathroom, and they can get to the machine. But where it lacks, in essence, is really the efficiency needing to be at the same level or close to the same level as any other human being on the face of the planet that uses that equipment. Now, we've got the brightest people in the world here that build these technologies out, Silicon Valley. We need to be thinking about that in the same way with disability inclusion, and that is that if we make things more efficient, a rising tide lifts everyone's boats. People with disabilities, older adults, other populations benefit it well. And that, you often see that with the curb cut mentality. I remember when they first put curb cuts in my neighborhood back in the 80s, people were complaining that no one on their street lived there who was in a wheelchair. So why are they spending all this money on building curb cuts? And what do we see today? Everybody loves curb cuts. Roll-in bags, bicycles, strollers, seniors who have difficulty lifting their leg to get onto the street. So it's a win-win for everyone. So if we think of universal design and inclusion, efficiency is most important. The second part of inclusion is really effectiveness. If someone is in a program or using a structure like a playground or a grocery store, it has to be as effective for them as it is for the rest of the population. So if the effectiveness is not there, in other words, they're not getting the same health benefits or the same enjoyment factor, then really it isn't as effective of a program or a venue as it should be. And the third part of inclusion is satisfaction. It has to be a satisfying experience equivalent to what everybody else is doing. So again, if someone is in a program and they're getting lots of assistance and they don't feel like they have the opportunity to participate on an equitable level with everyone else, then it's really not inclusion. So again, in conclusion, inclusion means efficiency, effectiveness, and satisfaction. That's the way we're defining this new campaign as we move forward. The second point is you've heard the term separate but equal. Now, we love the idea of special recreation programs and special education programs, but the word special has to be eliminated from our lexicon. We can no longer call things special, because once you call someone special or something special, then it separates them from the rest of the world. And those of you who are into the mindfulness part of life or the Buddhism realize that what this is all about, the source who created us, is really not about separation or specialness. It's about ordinariness, making people feel ordinary. So people with disabilities don't want to feel special. They don't want to feel like they're doing these amazing feats because they're able to go to a gym and exercise. They want to feel ordinary, which is the essence of life. The wholeness of life, of what we are, is we're one group working together to benefit everyone. And if there's someone who's left out of that group, it's our responsibility to get them in. So very important idea that I heard many, many years ago is that for long-term sustainable health improvements to occur, it has to come through the portal of public health. Public health is the last stop. We have children. I started as an adapted PE teacher in the mid-'70s in New York City public school system. When they laid off all the adapted PE teachers, I became the full-time adapted PE teacher because everybody else was gone. Nobody else knew what to do with, as they called them, and this is another bad term, these children. Do not use the word these or special. So there I was. Now, what has happened since then is we've got to think about public health as a place where when students graduate high school, they've got places to go. The unemployment rate in this country for people with disabilities has not changed a centimeter since the 90s. So we've got to be rethinking that. What are people with disabilities doing on a day-to-day basis if they're not involved in 8, 9, 10 hours a day at work? We have about 2/3 of the population of people with disabilities who are still unemployed or underemployed, looking for things to do. We think the Inclusive Health Coalition might be a great place to start. The third point is to achieve an evidence-based practice, we really have to have practice-based evidence. And I sit on many study sections, including the National Institutes of Health, and I see these studies come in for people with disabilities. You know, somebody wanted to run a randomized controlled trial for 35 people with multiple sclerosis or spinal cord injury, and they get slammed because the sample size is too small. And, you know, these very esoteric, high-level biostatisticians look at this and say, you think we're going to fund this study for $300,000 a year to train people with autism or multiple sclerosis or traumatic brain injury? And they get very low scores because the sample size is too small, which means their power to show effects is minimized, and they end up not getting funded. So we believe that this campaign will get us to understand something called practice-based evidence. Every one of you in the room or anyone on the call who has a practice that they've been involved with during their career that they are finding successful in terms of the inclusions aspects of it, we want to know about it in NCPAD and ACSM because we could take that information, and that's the origin of evidence that something's working in one community with one individual somewhere in the United States. And as we start to do that in our center, with now our capability and the technology we have, we could start to stitch these successful elements together and from there develop a practice base which could ultimately end up becoming evidence-based practice. So very important that all of us here today and those on the webcast understand that you have a role and a responsibility to work with us in a family manner to bring this together. And my last point is that when we think of committing to inclusion, we have to acknowledge those who came before us. Before I came to the University of Alabama, Birmingham, I was a faculty member in the first PhD program in the country at the University of Illinois Chicago, which was started by a very good friend of mine and my mentor, David Braddock. And David's primary goal when he started that department was to hire scholars with disabilities. So I got the opportunity for 11 years of my life to be hanging out with people like Jim Charlton, who wrote the book Nothing About Us Without Us. And if you haven't read that book, that is a must to understand the culture of disability. I would sit with Jim in faculty meetings. We'd have these rich discussions about health and wellness. David Mitchell, another great scholar in disability studies, was a faculty member. My dear friend Carol Gill, who was one of the ones in the early days to really fight for rights to get access to public transportation. So Commit to Inclusion today, has to recognize that if we're going to do this the right way, we need people with disabilities on the front of the bus, not on the back of the bus. And we need people with disabilities 10 years from now. Our hope, Jim and I, is that we have people with disabilities who are front and center in this inclusive health campaign and lead us in a direction where we've got a better society for all. Thank you. And now, I'm going to turn it over to another dear friend and colleague, Dr. Colleen Boyle, Director of the National Center on Birth Defects and Developmental Disabilities at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Wow, that's a lot. And a very esteemed epidemiologist in her previous life. So thank you for coming.
Well, good morning, everybody, and it's a delight to be here. And thank you to both of you for the opportunity to say some remarks on behalf of CDC. I wanted to thank NCPAD, Lakeshore, University of Alabama, the American College of Sports Medicine, really for the opportunity to share with the group a bit of the work that we're doing at CDC, and specifically the National Center on Birth Defects and Developmental Disabilities, and the difference we're making. Jim specifically asked me to say a couple opening remarks about our mission, and really from the perspective of inclusive health. So some of you may know that the center was created by the Children's Health Act of 2000, which established the center with the understanding that we would bring to the table, the inner circle of CDC, issues around people with disability. So one of our main missions is really to improve the health of people with disabilities. So we work to do that not just for children, not for adolescents, and not for adults, but really thinking about a lifespan-related aspect. And you're all familiar with CDC's protection mission. So we're really trying to bring that protection mission to people who are living with functional limitations. And we like to say that we want to make sure that they're not left out of programs. These are traditional programs and we're really helping to support their right to have access to health promotion opportunities. So you all know better than most people I talk to that 1 in 5 Americans have a disability. And for those people, there are real challenges to living the healthiest life possible. So our research tells us, and we do a lot in that research lane, that people with disabilities are more likely to have poor health practices, so they're more likely to smoke, they're more likely to have hypertension, and we're going to hear from our chronic disease director program here. They're more likely to be physical activity, most likely from an access and an inclusion perspective, and they're less likely to get the preventive health care they need. And in fact, health care costs associated with disability estimated at more than $400 billion in the U.S., and that actually is a quarter of all the healthcare costs for the nation. So these are large numbers, but behind them are real people for whom disability does not and should not equal poor health. And that really is the mantra for our center. So our center works collaboratively to improve the health of people with disabilities by tapping into existing healthcare surveys, data systems, health promotion programs, policy and communication efforts. So making sure that they, in fact, target or make specific tweaks so that they reach people with various types of functional limitations. And I'm going to mention just a few of the partners here and the work that we've done. So we've worked for 17 years with NICHPAD and supporting families, schools, healthcare providers, and individuals to ensure that people with disabilities are able to fully participate, as Jim says, in physical activity programs across the country. And we're really excited about some of the tools and resources that NICHPAD has developed. I want to mention one, which is the grades, which is the guidelines, recommendations, and adaptations, including disabilities. And what this uses is what Jim just said, sort of this evidence-informed approach to understand health recommendations and adaptations for programs and practices that tailor the health and fitness needs of disability. So not reinventing, not having a separate line, but really trying to improve what we do so people can take advantage of those. I also want to, for our own work, 2014 was really a sentinel year. So we worked with NICHPAD and the American College of Sports Medicine to roll out an important CDC vital sign. So vital signs is our CDC premier publication that really highlights a really important issue. And in 2014, we highlighted the physical activity among people with disabilities, highlighting the disparities and working to reduce health education. This was really focused on healthcare providers, trying to give them a prescription as to what they could do to really help improve the health of people with disabilities through that physical activity magic bullet. We've also been working with many other organizations represented here today, including the National Association of Chronic Disease Directors, through our program, which I think you might hear more about, reaching people with disabilities through healthy communities. So our chronic disease directors are really the force in public health for improving those issues around smoking cessation, hypertension control, all of those issues. So we're working around with them in terms of thinking about how we make our communities our community programs more accessible for people with disabilities. And we value the collaborations with many of you, including America Walks, and the President's Council on Fitness, Sports, and Nutrition, and the launch of the Surgeon General's call to action to promote walking and walkability to ensure that people with disabilities and related recommendations included in that report, and most importantly, the action that's following. So thank you very much for inviting CDC to be represented here. I'm here to reinforce our commitment, CDC's commitment to inclusion, and I invite you to challenge us in terms of what we do to make what we do better and more appropriate for all people, including people with disabilities. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Colleen. I now have the pleasure of calling on Walt Thompson, who is the president-elect of ACSM. Walt is Associate Dean and Professor of Kinesiology and Health at Georgia State University and has a profound commitment to this cause of disabilities. And you'll hear about his plans for his presidential year in ACSM.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Jim.
We make it easy.
It's kind of hard to remember those names, isn't it? I've known these guys for a long, long time, and I've always admired both of your work and Jim Rimmer, especially in the last 20 years. In 1994, I was recruited to Georgia State University to develop an interdisciplinary research center. I was a bench scientist, wearing a lab coat all day long, right, and with my eyes in a microscope. And then in 1995, we had this little party coming to Atlanta called the Paralympic Games. I said Paralympic Games on purpose because we also had another side party called the Olympic Games there. But I said the Paralympic Games because in 1995, I was contacted by the local organizing committee in Atlanta to help them coordinate the local research projects. We had 17 projects from scientists all over the world. They needed somebody on the ground to kind of help coordinate that. So I took my lab coat off, and university was closed anyway, so I took my lab coat off and started watching these scientists do their work with people at that time with physical disabilities, and I was just amazed, not only at the dedication of those scientists, but what those athletes were doing on the field of play. Well, make a long story short, they liked what I did, the International Paralympic Committee did, and so they appointed me to the Sports Science Committee, and I have served on the Sports Science Committee since 1996 and been to every Paralympic Games, summer and winter, since that time. We have coordinated hundreds of research projects, which has been just a joy to me. But the reason I'm telling you that is because it changed my life. In 1996, I took the white lab coat off, and I quit chasing isoenzymes around the lab. And to do something that is, to me, was more meaningful, and that was to work with athletes with physical disabilities. And now, because of the inclusion of athletes with intellectual disabilities in the Paralympic Games, both sets of athletes. So I'm incredibly honored to be the next president of the American College of Sports Medicine. As the president, you get to select some priorities for your presidential year, and hopefully, as the years go by, the presidential priority becomes a presidential legacy. I intend to have this inclusion message as my presidential legacy, which means I'm going to be working on this for a long time. We have already made some significant changes in the American College of Sports Medicine. One, Jim already mentioned, that is the certification program, the inclusion certification program. Highly successful, I should tell you. We also signed an MOU with the International Paralympic Committee, so there would be an exchange of research scientists and research ideas. And we have incorporated every single year for the last 10 years. We have incorporated into the annual meeting a specific symposium on athletes with disabilities. And then finally, this year, coming up in June, at our annual meeting in Denver, the Wolf Lecture. That may not mean anything to you, but for us as members of ACSM, that is the opening lecture at the annual meeting, and it will be given by Eve Van Landewijk. Eve is the chair of the Sports Science Committee of the International Paralympic Committee, the world's premier scientist in this area. He's going to be talking about Olympics, Paralympics, and Cyborg Olympics. It's going to be very interesting. If you haven't already registered for the annual meeting in Denver, come out and visit us. We'll give you a day pass, right? Jim will give you a day pass. And finally, there's been a lot of talk, as you remember, this week about breaking the 2-hour marathon. Everyone has heard of that, right? I think the athlete was 2 hours and 25 seconds or something like that. I didn't pay a whole lot of attention because our athletes in wheelchairs have broken 2 hours for 10 years. So I didn't pay a lot of attention to that. Now, as an academic, we're expected to do academic kinds of work, right? And so part of this change in my own interest area, I had the opportunity to work with Eve in writing 2 books. One, I'm not pitching the books. One is
Are available at,
Wiley.com. One is called the Paralympic Athlete. Highly successful book. It's an IOC Medical Commission book. That was followed by training and coaching the Paralympic athlete. I would like to take the opportunity to present these 2 books to Dr. Giannini for her outstanding legacy in this area. Thank you.
Great, and our next speaker, Lisa Followay, if you can come up. There she is. And she's going to say a few words. She's the Executive Director of Adaptive Sports Ohio. I met Lisa close to 10 years ago. Her son Casey was an athlete and really bonded at that time, and so happy to see her back.
Thank you. Well, I'm definitely in some great company up here, so I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the invitation to speak. My son Casey can do 20 pull-ups at once, but he's unable to put on his shoes. He can complete 25 dips while wearing a 40-pound weighted vest, but has trouble getting in and out of his car. He cannot climb the stairs, yet he's the second fastest 100-meter sprinter in the country in his classification. He can do a half marathon in less than an hour, but he's last in line to be considered for a job. His struggles exist because he was born with spina bifida and he's paralyzed in his legs. His successes, his strength, and his athleticism came because he was included in fitness and sports and provided the opportunity to participate. Those opportunities changed his life. This is what the coalition embodies and promotes: access, inclusion, fitness, and better health. Had Casey not been provided the opportunity to participate and engage in sports, he would most certainly fit into the statistic that 50% of individuals with spina bifida are obese. If Casey added 60 pounds onto his body, he would lose the independence he currently has. And as Dr. Rimmer's research indicates, he would be at an exaggerated risk for post-secondary conditions. Activity for Casey and others with disabilities, without a doubt, is crucial. However, the reason we're all here is because opportunities for individuals with disabilities are extremely limited. Thanks to the work of the Inclusive Fitness Coalition, we're seeing change start to take place. The most significant milestone in the last 10 years, in my mind, would be the 2010 Government Accountability Study on physical activity and athletic opportunities for students with disabilities. The study revealed that students with disabilities benefited from physical activity in sports, but participated at much lower rates than their peers without disabilities. At the urging of the Government Accountability Office, the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights issued guidance in 2013 clarifying schools' obligations under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. That guidance said that schools must provide interscholastic and intercollegiate sport opportunities for students with disabilities. It stressed that schools should use individualized assessments and allow for rule and equipment modifications to accommodate a student with disability without fundamentally altering the sport. This letter had a significant impact on the ability of many to participate in athletics, including Casey. As a 7th grader in 2009, Casey wanted to join his school track team, but was met with significant opposition. The Ohio High School Athletic Association initially denied Casey's participation, citing competitive inequity and a safety risk for the other participants on the track team. Although the Athletic Association eventually allowed Casey to participate, he was relegated to racing alone by himself. While advocating for Casey's inclusion, an athletic director told me that opportunities in athletics were a privilege and not a right. While she is correct, according to the law, if you're going to provide those opportunities for students without disabilities, you must provide them equally for students with disabilities as well. After the involvement of the Office for Civil Rights and the subsequent guidance issued in 2013, Casey gained full participation on his school track team. He was permitted to race at the same time as the footed athletes when no other wheeled competitors were present, and he was able to score points for his team. This is a great example of inclusion and a precedent that is being used across the country. Additional examples of inclusion that were born from the OCR guidance include the Special Olympics Unified Program that joins people with and without intellectual disabilities on the same team. In 2015, the Eastern College Athletic Conference became the first NCAA-sanctioned, the first to offer NCAA-sanctioned events and varsity-level competition in adaptive sports. This weekend, they're actually hosting the first ever collegiate para track and field championships. Another example would be the rise of state athletic associations, including students with disabilities in swimming and track and field competitions, their state championships. Specifically in Ohio, the Athletic Association added events for wheelchair competitors in 2013. From 2013 to 2016, the events enabled a total of 30 students with disabilities to represent their schools. There's been a groundswell, and in 2017, we've had 30 participants sign up this year alone just to represent their schools. This is possible because of community-based partnerships between school districts and coalition members. Adaptive Sports Program of Ohio has played a significant role by assisting students with disabilities gaining access to equipment and also providing training to those students, their coaches, and their parents so that they can gain full access and full participation on their team. The OCR guidance not only clarified schools' obligations in athletics, but it also provided suggestions on how schools could create parallel programs by working with community-based programs. Adaptive Sports Program of Ohio utilized this portion of the guidance to leverage support from Ohio's legislature, foundations, and school districts to create the first 2 school-based wheelchair basketball teams in Ohio. Both teams were a success and opened the door of opportunity to students with disabilities who had never experienced sport before, right at their home school. For these students with disabilities, it's not just about the opportunity or about winning every game, although they would love to. It's about the opportunity for them to win and to experience the benefits that interscholastic sports can provide. Cameron, one of our youngest athletes who joined the team this year, was unable to complete 1 lap around the court when he got started. By the end of the season, he was able to do 5 laps. On average, the participants in our program experienced a 23% increase in endurance and a 19% increase in strength over a short 4-month period. Inclusion works. There are more than 600 school districts in the state and thousands of students with disabilities that we need to engage. Because of this, we're working to scale the program across the state of Ohio. More opportunities like this must exist, not just in Ohio, but across the country. Casey and Cameron are one of many individuals with disabilities that must be provided access to sports. Systematic change is crucial and necessary. And while we have the backing of the Rehabilitation Act and OCR's guidance in our hand, we are still faced with limited resources. Financial, capital, and human resources are needed. Training needs to be available not just to school districts, but also community partners in order to serve individuals with disabilities in their programs. Federal funding for improving the health of Americans must include individuals with disabilities. Research on the impact and importance of activity is our ammunition, and it must continue. We need more champions, and we need more partners joining the coalition that are committed to creating equal access for healthy living. Together, let's make the next 10 years even better through this new partnership for inclusive health. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Lisa. Just to step back for a moment, I'm reminded of the comment by Nelson Mandela, who says, it always seems impossible until it's done. And that's what we are about here, really aspiring. We're hearing these aspirations, these inspirations, and we're hearing also about achievements. And that includes all of you as individual leaders and your respective organizations, that it seems impossible until it's done, and that's what we're doing. It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Juliette Rizzo, who is the former Miss Wheelchair America. She's in Maryland's top 100 women. We would say any geographical area, she'd be the top 100 women for, what's this about Maryland? And also Director of Special Projects and Partnerships and Events in the U.S. Department of Education. She's a citizen advocate. She's a professional advocate. She is one of the change makers, as all of you. Please join me. Oh, I got to say this. She was at the launch of the Surgeon General's call to action on walking and walkability, brought the house down. So I don't want to, we won't be bringing the house down, but it was just tremendous success and achievement and underscored thing. Please join me in welcoming Juliet.
Thank you. I'll start out much as I did there. Can you see me? Can you see me? No. Can you see me now? Can you see me now? This is because of champions like you making people with disabilities visible in today's society. Thank you very much for having me here today. Thank you both. It is my absolute honor, privilege, and a dream of mine to meet you face to face. Thank you so much. It was a great champion in my life, my grandmother. As Dr. Giannini would understand, my Italian nanny. She saw my potential long before I did. As a little girl, I really couldn't walk very well, and I fell a lot. The physical therapist told my mother that when she falls, do not pick her up. Let her figure out how to do it herself. And as my grandmother sat in her big, high-backed orange chair and watched me fall, I saw the tears in her eyes as I struggled to reach up, grab onto that table, and bring those weak knees to a standing position. And I can still hear my grandmother's words when I stood up. There she is, Miss America. She knew. She prophesied. And I can still hear those words come alive as I was crowned Miss Wheelchair America and as I do the great things that I'm capable of today because of champions like her and champions like you in these rooms. I was given the privilege to speak on behalf of 54 million people with disabilities, their mothers, their fathers, their sisters, their brothers, their advocates, their supporters, their service providers, their personal care assistants, etc. I traveled all over the world and visited programs like Lisa's. I had students in those programs look at me as I watched the young children with disabilities dive into the pool in their programs and say, Ms. Rizzo, why aren't you diving into the pool? I had to look at who I was on the inside. The young woman that wasn't allowed in the physical education courses because the champions like my grandmother, like Dr. Giannini, like the gyms here today, were not available to help me, to advocate for me. An advocate believes in you, sticks up for you when you are at risk of being excluded, ignored, and mistreated. Advocates like you uphold inclusion. You transform communities based on social justice principles. Advocates are the voices for those who cannot speak, but they're also the advocates for those who cannot see, those who cannot hear, those who cannot understand what's going on. Advocates help bring those human faces you mentioned forward. An advocate commits, and I underscore the word commits here today, to the idea of justice and equality. And you're willing to persevere with me to speak out when necessary, when I can't get my own needs met. When I can't get my own needs met, I need you. And that is who you are. NICHPAD and the IFC here today and all your supporters, you are the ones. When I heard it mentioned that there's somebody in here from the National Recreation and Parks Association, I got so excited, and I see so many familiar faces in the back. Because of programs like I Can Do It, You Can Do It, when Dr. Giannini allowed me to sit at the table and learn about all those things I couldn't do then, I started to want to do them. I started to want to be physically active. I started to want to speak about health and wellness. I wound up speaking at the National Recreation and Parks Association, the very first mainstream conference I spoke at about disability issues. I was honored. I started to go to the gyms that turned me down and say, it's not about no, it's all about yes. How can we get me in the doors? How can we get me through the bathrooms? How can we get me into the pools? I started to look at things like the Discovery Health Channel, and they had a program. The Discovery Health Channel had a series every year, the National Body Challenge series. And it was for people to lose weight. Well, I was a person with a disability who was a couch potato, we would say, a chair chip, we might say, because I couldn't get up and I couldn't get out and I couldn't exercise. But when I saw something like that advertised for everybody, you gave me the courage to go up and say, well, I want to be a part of that too. I want to lose weight. And when I went and weighed in at the National Body Challenge series, they didn't have scales that were big enough for me. I said, so what? I don't want that weight anyway, the wheelchair weight plus my weight. I said, we can figure this out. And no, they did. They took me seriously, very, very seriously for the very first time. Not only did I get to talk to the National Body Challenge series and the Discovery Health Channel, but I got a call from Hollywood asking me to be an honorary body challenger. The first woman with multiple severe disabilities to be on that programming and still shown in that programming today. And when it came to the producers looking at me and saying, well, what can she do? You know, maybe she can do something really simple like a Tai Chi or something in her chair. Or no, what if I work out in a gym? What if I swim in a pool? What if I go sailing in Florida? And I did exactly that. I did exactly that with the support of champions like you that believed it was absolutely possible. And what about when Dr. Giannini, they decided when I was out in Florida with them and the I Can Do It, You Can Do It initiative, hey, Juliet, how about if you get into a kayak? Do what? A kayak. A kayak propelled by a young man with severe, and I see Lauren in the back because she was with me when I did it, weren't you, Lauren? Propelled by a young man with multiple severe disabilities. Did I have the faith? Did I have the trust to allow myself to get into a kayak with another person with a disability? Could I practice what I preached? Absolutely, I could. And as we sailed down those waters, and I know Lauren still has the blackmail pictures, you know, I realized that when the Surgeon General called me into battle 2 years ago, to roll out the walkability and rollability of communities across America, that I had been called not into battle for just one day, but I'd been called into battle for a lifetime with each and every one of you to make sure that those words and these words today are not just words for today. I realized that rollability and walkability were not just for pedestrians, they're for wheelchair passengers just like me. One young lady in the disability community said it the best to me as I traveled as Miss Wheelchair America, advocating for health and fitness for all. She said, Juliet, do you know what the acronym DISABLED stands for? DISABLED. Deserving individuals seeking a better life, an education, and a date. Now, I changed that for the Surgeon General, and I said it was deserving individuals seeking a better life, exercise, and a date. And he really liked that. It is all about inclusion, as she said. Inclusion just about everywhere. When I walked into my first gym in my neighborhood, it was just an everyday gym. I went there 3 times and the salespeople turned me down. I'm ecstatic. I talked to some of you earlier about what we're doing in gyms across America today, which you'll hear about in a little bit. But I went from one gym to the next, until I found the one that was a boxing gym. And you might have seen me in 2 boxing commercials now. But, you know, I also heard that the record for the speed bag was held by a young man in a wheelchair. We'll have to check that out. But he might have some competition now because of you. That boxing gym I walked into, I said to him, I'm not taking no for an answer. All the other gyms in the neighborhood did. And the man stepped away from me. And I thought to myself, oh no, not another one. He came back out with a pink boxing glove in his hand and said, put this on. Put this on. I put on my health and my wellness and my fitness for him. I made the commitment to stick to it because of him. He got me up out of bed every day. He got me in the boxing gym, and I trained under a 2-time middleweight champion. Some of you know him by the name of Joppy. Joppy taught me how to use the speed bag. Joppy made up for all those times I wasn't allowed in the physical education classes. There are so many cardiovascular risks for me. There are so many secondary conditions for me. I have numerous ones, too many to name today. The weight gain, not by choice, not by poor eating habits. Sometimes for some of us, just by the nature of the prescription drugs that we have to take, the drugs that keep us breathing. 50% of adults with disabilities don't get enough of any type of aerobic exercise. And adults with disabilities like myself are more than 3 times likely to have chronic diseases. I already have 4 diseases. I don't need any more. Commit with me today. Commit to take our health seriously. I cringed just weeks ago when the doctor said to me, Juliet, I'm sorry to say, but we've got to figure something out. You're morbidly obese. I never thought I would hear those words, but there's a call to action in those words. I need you to help me figure out how to be on the other end of that like I was years ago. My body changed, but the nation is changing, as you heard in the speeches before mine, to welcome and support people with disabilities in these arenas of public health. I need you. I don't want to be another type of statistic. The accommodations for people with disabilities in these sectors are not expensive. There are simple things we can do by creating accessible attitudes. With that, anything is possible. Rolling around in a wheelchair for me is aerobic activity, and I now am ecstatic that NitchPad includes me in their walking movement. This is how I walk. I walk with this chair. I fist pump and pretend. You know, I'm moving like you. I have one leg that can still move, and as far as I'm concerned, when I'm doing this, that's my walk. That's my jog. You are my champions to help me keep those limited movements I have left up and going. My commitment remains very, very strong. It was actually during the Miss Wheelchair America pageant, the Miss Wheelchair America judges, Miss Wheelchair Maryland judges, came up to me and asked me some crazy questions. One of them was, and of course we got all the questions on the ADA, all the questions on accessibility, the stuff that you study for. But when they asked me the simple questions, and bear with me on this, the one question, well, if you could be any type of farm animal, Juliet, what would you be? I said, what? So I turned it around on them and I said, a pig, because I like to get down and dirty to solve disability issues. And then it was the second question. If you could change anything about your life, anything about you, what would you change? And I said I would change my commitment to my health. And I did. And that was the hardest thing to say, because I realized when I got the call to be on major television speaking about women's health, and Dr. Giannini knows about this, that I all of a sudden, as a woman with a disability, was no longer perceived as sickness. I was perceived as a healthy woman who just happened to use a wheelchair. And that change in perception, that change in image, is because of you and everything that you do. You're helping to put those human faces out there. And I ask each and every one of you today to think about the human faces like your son and put them front and center so we don't see the statistics. We see the people behind the progress. I ask each and every one of you here today to think about this story. Before I lost my abilities to walk, I decided I was going to run and jog. I decided to do that at my college, and I put on my shorts and I put on my tank top and I got up and went to that track. And when I went to that track, I was so busy looking at you because you were so tall and had incredibly long legs. I was so busy looking at you because you were so much better than me. And I was looking at you because you had the perfect body. And I was thinking, why am I even out here trying to exercise, trying to be fit like everyone else? And I started to get really discouraged. I stopped the discouragement when all of a sudden I heard these words, Coach, Coach, look at how fast she's running, Coach. And I looked up, and it was 50 Special Olympians looking at me, thinking I was the fastest thing on the track. To someone, you are a hero. To someone, you are their champion. It's really important that we continue this work. We're changing not only the industry of public health, we're changing the attitudes and raising awareness out there so that when someone like me, who right now is 100 pounds overweight and a risk for heart attacks, can turn around to the coworker that turned around to me at the last conference I went to and said, hey, Juliet, you want to go jogging with me after the conference today? I never put my clothes on so fast, my shorts, my workout clothes. And while I couldn't jog with him in the terms of what jogging is for everyone else, I was out there, I was breathing fresh air, I was participating fully with him. And yes, I became the pace car, I know. But I was still out there living the message of what we're living here today. And it was a dream, Jim and Jim, to see you especially, Jim, and I call them the accessible Jims. It was a dream, and now it's a reality. A reality that I need to ask you to commit to for a lifetime today. I need you to commit to influence your partners in this room, to commit to influence the decision makers that are still out there that haven't been sold yet, to change the public opinion, to change the attitudes, to change and dispel the stigmas that change my life and the lives of all those millions that I mentioned in the beginning, to ensure social change and to ensure equity for all. You know it's an anniversary, and Jims, I need you to stand up on either side of me and bring your glasses. Bring your glasses. It's the 10th anniversary, and there's only 3 of us up here. I need 7 other people up here with me, please. 7 other people, come forward, please.
Now.
And if you don't have a glass, to raise high, and where is that John Adams? Because we're talking about a commitment to a Bill of Rights. Come on in.
There he is.
I need him. He can hold up the picture. And if you don't have a drink to hold up for an anniversary toast, I need you to hold up your arm with your big old muscle if you can, and you're going to fist bump when we do this. And if you can't do any of that, figure out what you can do to help us make an anniversary toast. Let's practice, okay? We're going to practice. On the count of 3, I want to hold up your fist-pumped arms. Hold up your glasses. Okay, you've got that down. Now, let's just practice if we can say health equity for all. Let's see, can you say it? Health equity for all. That's okay. We'll do it one more time for real, and we're going to do it as loudly as we can. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Happy anniversary. Health equity for all. Say it again. Health equity for all. One more time. Health equity for all. Fist bumps higher. Health equity for all. Today, just like my Nani, you are all my new champions. Champions of not only walkability and rollability, but of possibility. And I'll say it again. Champions of not only walkability and rollability, but possibility for all. Thank you. You walk, I roll, and I hope you find the courage to join us all as we commit to inclusion and join the Partnership for Inclusive Health. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I would hate to be Harold Jones at this point. I would hate to be Harold Jones, and I've never said that about a dean, so good luck. But the next speaker is Dr. Harold Jones, Dean of the School of Health Professions at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, who has the responsibility of trying to pick up where Juliet left off.
Actually, I'm challenged every day of my life because Jeff Underwood, who is at the back, who is the CEO of the Lakeshore Foundation, and I share Jim as an employee. I also want to echo my statements of support and appreciation for the comments that Juliet made. And I was particularly inspired because I'm married as well to a passionate Italian. And so I can know where she's coming from. And as soon as I heard the word "nani," that's what my wife, who is still teaching in her now 50th year of teaching physical activity and working with many individuals who are living with disabilities, the passion she brings to that job. And so as a result of that, it's a real pleasure for me to be here. I am the Dean of the School of Health Professions at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And about 5 years ago, we started, more than 5 years ago, about 7 years ago, we started the creation of a collaboration with the Lakeshore Foundation to do research, to look at ways in which we could help improve the quality of life of people living with disabilities. They already had such incredible programming, and we were able to bring our research expertise. At the time, we went looking for a consultant to help us find the person who should run that collaborative that was created. So we went to Jim Rimmer for 2 years, asking him who would be the best person that could really wrap their head around the research that needed to be done, policy, how we move programs into practice, and all of that. And Jim kept telling us, well, maybe you could go this way, but I'm not really sure about this. We went back and forth for 2 years, playing this dance of, I'm going to get you to Birmingham if it kills me. It almost did. Fortunately, 2 years later, we were able to convince his wife to come, which was the key thing in making this work. And ever since that time, I have had an incredible education from Jim about the importance of inclusion and the importance of physical activity, recreation, and sports for people who are living with disability, and how important it is to include them. As a School of Health Professions, we have a number of programs, including one of the nation's 16 nutrition and obesity research centers. And as we talked more and more, we talked about how that while Lakeshore had built its reputation around the physical activity world, we needed to bring nutrition, we needed to bring mindfulness, we needed to bring a whole range of things if what we were really interested in doing was giving people the right to the quality of life that everybody else and everybody in our society should have. And so I'm really excited today that you are, after all the incredible work that's been done by the champions in the Inclusive Fitness Coalition, that you're expanding and launching a commitment to inclusion, because we need to be including all people in our research, all people when it comes to all the matters of health. And physical activity is certainly a key one in our society, but so is nutrition, mindfulness, and all other types of things where people who are living with disabilities have been systematically excluded for so many years, and it's time that we get this and we get this right. So I'm really excited to be here. The real reason I was here and I was invited was the opportunity to read a very short statement from Senator Tammy Duckworth. Those of you in this room are aware, as both a member of Congress and as a U.S. Senator from Illinois, how much she has dedicated her life and her passion to addressing the needs of people living with disability, especially those in our veteran communities and in our active military communities. And so I just want to read this statement from her. It's important that every American, no matter if they are living with a disability, has the opportunity to lead a healthy, active life. I'm glad that the Inclusive Fitness Coalition is working to make that a reality for millions of Americans with disabilities, and I look forward to continuing my work to protect and strengthen disabilities' rights nationwide. We need leaders. We need leaders in policy. We need leaders in politics. We need leaders in our community. We need leaders in education. We need leaders in all parts of our world to be dedicated and committed to this. Since Jim has been there, we have made incredible strides, I think, at our own university in that direction. We now have an I Can Do It, You Can Do It program, which we've been running for 4 years within our school. But the impact of that has been incredible, not only on the individuals that I've come into contact with who are benefiting directly from these programs, but also all of those who are living with individuals and supporting individuals and who are eagerly anticipating the day when we truly will have an inclusive health society. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this day with you, and I'm excited that this partnership is beginning. So both celebrate our past, but let's celebrate an even better future. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Appreciate that. And Senator Duckworth is indeed a champion with high commitment to this cause, as others in Congress and other leaders around the country. You know, if this were a sermon or a book or a novel or a TED Talk, they all seem to go through kind of 3 parts. One is what, okay, what, and the second is so what. And I think we're past all of those right now. And as we're already getting into, the third is what now? So we've got the what, we definitely have the so what, and now we are continuing on this what now, as we'll do as we close this event. I'm going to real quickly just introduce, and they can extend this, but just in the interest of time, early adopter organizations in regard to this movement, both the Inclusive Fitness Coalition, but also the Partnership for Inclusive Health, to let them just give testimony to their individual and their organizational commitments. So in this order, we're going to hear from Charlene Bergeson of Active Schools, where she is Executive Director, and Kate Kraft of America Walks, where she is Executive Director, and John Robicher, which of the National Association of Chronic Disease Directors, where he is Chief Executive Officer. And then 2 more individuals, Amy Bantham of IRSA, the International Health Racquet and Sports Club Association, where she's Vice President of Health Promotion and Health Policy. And then lastly, but certainly not last in regard to the importance of these organizations, Katie Bishop of the American Heart Association, where she is Manager of State and Local Obesity Policy. So I'll leave it to the individuals in regard to keeping that order, but Charlene first, please.
Thank you, and good morning. I am Charlene Bergeson, Executive Director of Active Schools, and as someone who has worked in the school physical education and physical activity profession my entire life, I take very seriously the responsibility that schools have for the physical activity, inclusion, and the health of all children. And I personally want to help ensure that no one has the physical education experience that Juliet referred to. We've changed a lot of things, and we're going to continue to be thoughtful and careful about providing those inclusive environments that all kids deserve. Active Schools is a national movement to ensure that 60 minutes of physical activity a day is the norm in K-12 schools across our country. And we do this through the provision of physical education and before, during, and after school physical activity programs that meet the needs and interests of all students. Or as I like to say, when you kind of envision crazy, hectic, full school days, we want to fit physical activity into every crack and crevice of that school day. All children deserve to benefit from and enjoy physical activity. And to ensure that this happens in meaningful ways requires a purposeful attitude and approach. And I think that's really important around this conversation we're having about meeting the needs of all children, including those with disabilities, that it's about meaningful inclusion, not being the scorekeeper, but being a participant in activity. And it is about our teachers and our physical activity leaders having a purposeful attitude and approach, that they realize that it doesn't happen automatically. It happens because they attend to the environment that will create that. It takes a village to create cultural norms by sharing best practices and working and supporting one another. That is why Active Schools is pleased to find that community in the Partnership for Inclusive Health. People like you, people like others who are tuning in remotely, and people who are on the ground doing this work every day. In the past year, Active Schools has collaborated with Lakeshore Foundation and its National Center on Health, Physical Activity, and Disability to conduct two different projects. One is a survey of physical education teachers to increase our understanding of what's working in schools and how we can support the physical education teachers and the administrators. And we received over 700 responses on this survey. So we'll start out on a positive note. A little more than half of the respondents reported that they often provide adaptations or accommodations in a variety of ways. So what does that look like? That could be everything from adaptations or accommodations around facilities, spaces, equipment, how information is presented and demonstrated, and objectives or rules for the game. So really creating an environment that is modified so that all students can participate. However, there was some not so great news from the survey as well. Only 23% said that they feel very prepared to provide an inclusive environment and meet the needs of students with a disability. That's less than a quarter of physical education teachers feel very prepared. Furthermore, 19% that they said they don't feel prepared at all. 1 in 5. And we know that there's students with disabilities in every school. So we need all physical education teachers to be prepared and to be confident. Also, over half reported that they were not included or infrequently included in the development and monitoring of an IEP or a 504 plan for students with a disability. So if we're educating the whole child, we're educating them academically, but physically, emotionally, socially as well. We need physical educators to be part of those IEP and 504 plans. So as you can see, there is a lot of need, but also therefore a lot of opportunity. We also partnered with Lakeshore NICPAD on a video contest to illustrate best practices for providing an inclusive environment, because a picture paints 1,000 words. And as Jim Rimmer said when he was talking, we need to show evidence-based practice. We need to show that it can be done, it is being done, and it's doable. So we had over 30 innovative and heartwarming submissions, and the top 10 are available on YouTube. You can look on our Active Schools website to see those videos. And they're really video snippets because we want people to tune in and focus and take home the message and see it in a lot of different ways. So I am so pleased to be here today to share Active Schools' commitment to creating inclusive, healthy communities by helping to ensure that active school environments are inclusive environments and that they meet the needs and interests of all students, including those with disabilities. And that is my commitment to you as a national leader in the Active Schools movement and all those who are involved in it, bringing them along as well. Thank you.
I think all these are tough acts to follow, right, for sure. I'm Kate Kraft, the Executive Director of America Walks, and I just want to thank the Gems and Juliet and all the other great speakers for having us here today. We are a national organization devoted exclusively to making America a great place to walk. We were started 20 years ago by a handful of local pedestrian advocates who came together and said, we need a way to share with each other the lessons learned and to support each other. And I'm happy to say 20 years later, we have a network of over 30,000 individuals and organizations throughout the country who are advocating for walkable communities as a necessity for all, as a way to support health and wellness. The way we do that is providing education, training, resources, and convening so that those that want to get involved have a way to understand how to get involved and connections to other people involved in promoting walkability in their community. We have many partners throughout the country, and we work very hard with our partners in the Everybody Walk Coalition, including ACSM and many others of you here, to really lift up those champions and give them a national platform so they can tell their stories and inspire others, much as we've been inspired here today. We are totally committed to inclusion as a part of our agenda and activating our advocates on behalf of inclusion. We've worked over the last year with NCPAD to develop an inclusive healthy community microgrant program that I'm happy to say we've had our first 25 applicants that we're in the process of reviewing right now. And this is really to provide small catalytic funds for healthy community coalitions to bring into their work an inclusive agenda and to work with organizations that work with people with disabilities in their communities. And we're seeing more and more interest in this agenda going forward. We also do something called the National Walking Summit, which will be held this September in St. Paul. I have to do a little bit of a commercial. And at the summit, we have a large inclusive presence. We intend to have sort of a critical mass of people with disabilities and wheelchair users joining us at the summit so that we are sure to have more of an inclusive agenda, and many of the sessions that are being presented from community members include that. So with that, I just say America Walks is thrilled to be a partner in this new partnership for inclusive, healthy communities. We pledge to inform, educate, and activate our network to incorporate inclusion into all their local efforts. And thank you. It's just a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to being involved in the What's Next.
Good morning. I'm John Robicher from the National Association of Chronic Disease Directors, and I'm really proud to be here at the launch of the Partnership for Inclusive Health. I'll say on a personal note, my Aunt Ida Mae Daly and my grandmother, Hazel Begum, in 1973 wrote, I thought, a very important book called Adventures in a Wheelchair. And it was about advocacy here in Washington, D.C., working towards the American Disability Act. And I'm really here, I think, standing on their shoulders and representing the work that they did. I remember my aunt never asked. I remember being in Washington, D.C. with her as a teenager, and she never wanted me to help her. She was always prepared, even though there were no sidewalk cutouts anywhere in Washington, D.C. I remember her going house to house, advocating on behalf of people in wheelchairs. So I'm very, very proud of the work that she did early on. I'm now in a role where I'm Chief Executive Officer of the National Association of Chronic Disease Directors. We represent 6,500 public health officials who fight for chronic disease prevention and control every day. And we believe it's important to make healthy choices the easy choices, irrespective of physical or intellectual ability. Many here know, and Dr. Boyle said that 1 in 5 Americans suffer from a disability, but less commonly known is that chronic diseases like heart disease, cancer, diabetes do discriminate against people with disabilities who report overall poor health. And we want to eliminate this and other health disparities in the U.S. Through our programming and from more than 10 years of advocacy work on behalf of people with disabilities, NACDD has seen the impact that can be made when people make the healthy choice, the easy choice for everyone. To that end, we have integrated inclusion courses into our National Chronic Disease Academy, and most recently into our Walkability Action Institute, which I may change the name to Walkability and Rollability Action Institute. We work on obesity prevention programs and place a special emphasis on supporting those Americans who have less opportunity to participate in exercise, healthy eating, and chronic disease screenings because of physical or intellectual challenges. NACDD joined the Commitment to Inclusion Coalition in 2016 through a pilot project that we conducted with NCPAD and CDC called Reaching People with Disabilities Through Healthy Communities. Last year, through our work with our partners on this pilot, we helped 10 neighborhoods in 5 states develop healthier initiatives that include and account for the needs of those experiencing disabilities. For example, in Olean, New York, NACDD and disability inclusion activists worked with city officials to improve the street design of a major thoroughfare. The street's pedestrian crossing did not account for the needs of those with physical, hearing, and visual limitations, but now, through the efforts of the advocates, the entire community can benefit from a safer and easier walk to work or visit the new shops on their North Union Street. In Adams County, Ohio, 7 schools received adaptive bikes that will help hundreds of children participate in recreation and physical education activities alongside their classmates. Now, more children can enjoy and share in the simple joy of riding a bike. So on behalf of the chronic disease directors across the United States, I share my congratulations to all the members of the Inclusive Fitness Coalition for your important work and express our full support to our partners, the American College of Sports Medicine, the Lake Shore Foundation, and NCPAD, as we begin this new charge to promote inclusive health. So the National Association of Chronic Disease Directors commits to continuing its decade-long work to create opportunities for all Americans to make the healthy choice the easy choice wherever we live, work, and play. Thank you.
Good morning. Amy Bantham with the International Health Racquet and Sports Club Association. I'm here today representing IRSA, which is the trade association for the global health club industry, representing 10,000 member clubs throughout the world. I'm also here today on behalf of the IRSA Foundation, which is our foundation with a mission and vision to develop the capacity of health clubs to deliver evidence-based health promotion programs to people with or at risk for chronic conditions. And today, through the IRSA Foundation's Access Health Inclusive Fitness Initiative and UFIT, we're helping IRSA member clubs open their doors to people living with disability. We're so honored to be here today with partners that we've worked with for so many years on inclusive fitness through UFIT, led by the UNESCO Chair for Inclusive Fitness. And we're so proud to be an early adopter to this new partnership for inclusive health. This partnership will strengthen our individual efforts to inclusivize communities across the nation. I want to speak a little bit about the pilot programs that we have currently underway in IRSA member clubs. We have 6 pilot programs in clubs in Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York. The clubs are working with local disability service providers and master instructors, and already, and this is hot off the press, just getting underway as of May 1 and June 1st, we're beginning to welcome people with Parkinson's, with multiple sclerosis, cerebral palsy, visual impairments, and autism into these pilot clubs. The pilot programs are helping clubs provide programming and services to people living with disability. And we're starting small with 6 clubs, but our goal is to replicate these in communities throughout the nation. IRSA and the IRSA Foundation commit to creating inclusive, healthy communities by working collaboratively with our partners and our member clubs to achieve a common goal of helping people of all abilities live longer, healthier, and more active lives. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Katie Bishop with the American Heart Association, and on behalf of the American Heart Association, I just want to say that we really appreciate being asked to be an early adopter of the Partnership for Inclusive Health. I'm sure many of you know of the American Heart Association, but we are devoted to saving people from heart disease and stroke, the two leading causes of death in the world. And we have made an internal commitment to ensuring that all people have access to safe places to be physically active through pursuing our advocacy efforts for inclusive policies, development of accessible programs, and delivery of extensive education for health and well-being regardless of ability. Through our Voices for Healthy Kids initiative, a joint initiative between the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and the American Heart Association, we are working with communities across the nation to ensure that all children have access to healthy foods and physical activity where they live, learn, and play. We advocate for policies for quality physical education, for provision of healthy school foods, and for active transportation, including safe routes to school. And in our national marketing and educational efforts, we are committed to ensuring that our collateral materials connect to and represent people of all abilities. We're committed to ensuring that consumers can benefit from information by providing accessible digital content, inclusive imagery in our health promotion materials, and also inclusive language in our key messages. So I just wanted to say that we really appreciate being invited here today and are really proud to be a partner in the commitment to inclusion. So thank you so much.
Let's give, if we may, just one more indication of our appreciation, but let's extend it to all of you, because all of your organizations and all of you as individuals are leaders. One more time, please. Okay, I think our energy and excitement level is still within safe levels, so I am going to ask Juliet to return and also Jim Rimmer to join us. So Juliet, please.
A few years ago, I was in the hospital, and as I was in the hospital finding shingles through my head and eyes and out of work for 4 months and in intensive care and isolation for 14 days, when I came out of it, the doctor said to me, she said, "My gosh, Juliet," she goes, "you survived. We almost could have lost you on one day. But the reason why you survived is," she said, "you were amazingly fit." A testimony to what's possible when I learned my rights and I learned what was available to me, and I learned from access to action to inclusion through these rights. I also learned something that was critically important, and I share this because we're going to have somebody special help me read today. But when people have the right to access opportunities within their communities, their lives change. There's a young lady in this room today that surprised me and joined me this morning. She fights in the CrossFit gyms across the area to make sure that people with epilepsy can work with their trainers and to stay in those gyms. I'm touched this morning because one of my colleagues, Tony Fowler, is here. Somewhere in his family, there might be a connection to disability. I don't know that. I know that he has championed me, and he's here today as an individual in the mainstream who supports people with disabilities and their rights. I'm here to tell Corey's story because Corey is a dear, dear, dear close friend of mine who has very severe and complex mental health disabilities. And while fighting through 2 different states to get him not only the accommodations, but the health care and the medication that he needs, which are far greater than anything he could afford while working, having to quit work because everything that he needed cost more than what he was making at work. Corey was searching a year ago for a day program because there was nobody that can deal with his conditions or his triggers or his PTSD or his flashbacks or his regressions or just accept him in society. But it was through one of our great connections, through Major League Baseball. I know Curtis Pride, and Curtis Pride is the coach of Gallaudet Baseball. And in the Gallaudet Baseball community, which is a deaf community, Corey found a new home. He's not in a day program. For the last 6 months, he went to baseball practice and assisted the coaches under Major League Baseball's Curtis Pride. That's the best day program you could ever have for a person with those needs. And I'm touched today as we move to, Jim, these Bill of Rights. I'm touched beyond my wildest dreams because I saw a smile in the back of the room, and I only just met this man recently. His name is Michael E. O'Donnell. And Michael is an assistant professor of American Sign Language at the George Washington University. I didn't know that he would come this morning because he's got a class to teach and finals to administer, and I don't know what he did with those children this morning, those students this morning. But to see him in the back of the room, he told me just 2 nights ago that he had a daughter who was interested in public health. He wrote me a note and passed it to me when I stepped outside. He said, "My daughter's here today. Would you please stand up?" This is our next generation of public health. She came here today with her father. And Jim, I don't know how we're going to do these Bill of Rights, but everybody is going to take one and do one. Would you like to read the first of the Inclusive Health Bill of Rights?
I'd be delighted. All people have the right to barrier-free access to health promotion programs and services offered within their communities.
John Adams.
All people have the right to navigate barrier-free within fitness facilities, utilize inclusive equipment, and participate fully in group fitness settings.
And I'd like for you to come up. Would you share your name?
Sure. My name is Tara O'Donnell. Which number 3?
Number 3.
All people have the right to accessible green space within their communities, including parks and playgrounds.
And I'd like for Michael to read the next one.
All people have the right to access opportunities within their communities that promote both indoor and outdoor active leisure and recreational activities.
And I'd like for Michael just to share a few words about that.
So whenever we think of, or we're speaking of full inclusion, we tend to think about physical disabilities or physical barriers that we have to deal with. But we must not forget about other kinds of barriers, like communication and language and culture. So sometimes we have to work with disabled people in wheelchairs who have hearing loss as well, like he has. So those are other challenges that we must not forget about as well. And we're supporters from the deaf community, and we can make strong coalitions for that cause.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. Thank you both for being here today and surprising us with your presence. Tony, would you like to read number 5?
Number 5.
This is for Charlene.
All children have the right to full involvement in daily physical education, activities, and after-school sports participation.
Number 6, I'm going to dedicate to Bobby Lujano. You work with him. I know you do. And if it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't be here today. All people have the right to improved infrastructure that supports active commuting opportunities, to be able to get to the places that you need to be able to participate fully. Who would like to read number 7? I need somebody to come up here and read number 7.
All people have the right to accessible signage in order to navigate and interact effectively within their communities.
Thank you. Jim, I need you to read number 8.
All people have the right to increased access to public transportation.
Allison, can you read number 9?
All people have the right to access and purchase healthy and low-cost food and beverages in public services, venues, including schools and work sites.
And 10, if you have it with you, please read it with us together. All people have the right to education and access to healthy and low-cost food options within their communities. We must all own these Bill of Rights. Thank you so much. Mr. John Adams will be available to help you sign those Bill of Rights immediately after this program.
Thank you, Julia.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Next speaker is Jeff Underwood, president of the Lakeshore Foundation, and also instrumental in helping me move from Chicago to Birmingham, and a very good friend.
I packed his bags and loaded the truck. Thank you. First of all, real quickly, I know we're getting short on time. It was an honor for me to be in this at the inaugural event, establishing the IFC 10 years ago. Thanks to the founding fathers and mothers, thanks to the early adopters now. Oftentimes, NICPAD and Lakeshore are mentioned together. I do need to acknowledge the incredible support we also get from UAB to make NICPAD happen. And my job now is to read a proclamation. I feel like I should be the guy in the hat reading the proclamation, but let me just get to it. Join us in our efforts to influence decision makers to change policy to ensure health equity for all, to change public opinion and attitudes regarding stigmas, and to mobilize resources for social change to create a better society for all. Commit to inclusion and join the Partnership for Inclusive Health. Hear, hear.
I'm going to recognize Allison in just a moment for the great work that she's done in making this possible, but let me ask a question. I know you'll know. We're wanting everyone to sign the Bill of Rights. Where will that occur, Allison?
At the registration table where you got your name badges, we'll have a poster of the Bill of Rights, so we encourage you all to sign it on your way out. And we do have a photographer available until 11, so please take some pictures with the banners, the Bill of Rights, and feel free to mix and mingle for the
And with other
minutes.
people, right?
Yes, yes.
we would encourage that. Well, this has been wonderful. The plot line of almost all novels comes down to two things. Someone goes on a journey. That's the Inclusive Fitness Coalition, which has gone on a journey indeed, a successful and exciting one, over the last 10 years. And here's the second plot line. Someone new comes to town. And it's amazing how you can interpret novels that way. And certainly, obviously, that's the Partnership for Inclusive Health that is new, won't be new that long, but it is new right now, and you're all part of it. And just last thing about this, I could not be more appreciative. We could not be more appreciative of just your presence here, because it is a commitment of time. You could do all kinds of things. And then you as individuals and your organizations could do all kinds of things. But we're together here, and I appreciate your presence and what it represents, and also what we'll be doing following this event. There is that saying that if you want to go fast, go alone, and that if you want to go far, go together. And that's exactly where we are, except we're going to go both fast and far with your leadership. Thank you all for being part of this. Great, thank you. So we're done. Photographs, banners, make sure everybody signs the Bill of Rights. And again, thank you all very much.